Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is your other succulent host.
Oh, don't ever say that again. Brian, hi.
I'm thinking about plants. I'm watching the rain on the plants out the window, and I'm thinking about now I need to learn about plants and put more plants in my house.
Well, I have an app now, which is
I saw you say this.
Yeah, which is basically shows you like you not register, you like create a profile for all your plants in your house or your houseplants, and like it tells you like based on the plant it is, like when it needs to be watered and fed and stuff. But you can go pro and it'll show you like what's the perfect light level for it and stuff like that. I feel like I'm not going to do that ever, but yeah, maybe all the plants won't die now, which would be great.
It's something to aspire to, going pro.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to learn to repot and stuff like that.
So we're here to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, season 6 episode 18, Entropy. Yep. So Brian, do you want to kick us off with a Buffy Ann summary?
For sure. So this was first aired on April 30th 2002. It was directed by James A. Contner, who last directed Dead Things, and was written by Drew Z. Greenberg, who last wrote Older and Far Away. Drew Z. Greenberg, of course, being the gay writer on the staff, and who had that scene where Willow made the two boys kiss for their enjoyment, or whatever it was. It was weird anyway. Or no, it was
the power trip.
He wanted to have them kiss for their amusement, but they made them dance in cages instead.
Yeah,
all kind of weird. Anyway, here's your Buffy Ann summary. Anya tries and fails to get someone to wish harm to Xander. She gets drunk with Spike and has revenge sex. Willow has tapped into the spy camera network and of the Troika. Stop this. And Buffy and Xander witness this. There's no for comma there, and it makes it really confusing. Anyway, Xander angrily confronts Spike, who reveals Buffy and he had an affair. Xander is furious. Willow and Dawn also know. Tara returns to Willow. My major problem there is framing the sex that Anya and Spike have as revenge sex. Yeah. It's in no way that. It's like genuine connection and someone like taking her seriously and talking to her. Yeah. And she's like, that's nice.
Can we call it an affair as well between Buffy and Spike if there's not a third party? I would always see an affair as like a kind of excursion outside of a relationship.
Yeah, I think that would be the classic definition.
Okay, so scooting over to the Bronze for some rainy day banter. I'm imagining we're sitting in the Bronze with a massive, like a massive 90s cup of coffee that's like the size of a soup bowl for some reason. We're in some asbestos ridden couches, really sinking back into. I don't think this is a well maintained cafe they have.
That's fair enough.
The Bronze. And so as we may have mentioned in passing, we've moved recently, and being in unfamiliar territory and an unfamiliar house, with an old house with character and creaks and all this kind of stuff, we decided let's watch as much fucking horror as we possibly can while we are still intimidated by the darkness. So you made a choice find, I think.
Yeah.
Which we've been watching, which is a TV show from, I want to say the first season aired in 2016. Yeah. Called Channel Zero.
Yeah, it's there were 4 seasons in total, though realistically it was 2 seasons with 2 6-episode arcs each. So it is as is classic for the horror genre and TV, it is a anthology series where every 6 episodes is a new story. The first one is what's called Candle Cove, and we'll talk about that in a second. I came onto it because I was doing a bit of reading because I was like, oh, I'm loving Evil at the moment. We've been loving Evil. We're now like up to date with it, and we're watching it on a weekly basis. And I'm looking forward to it coming out because it's just loads of fun. And I was like, oh, there's a real dearth of great horror TV shows. So I looked up some lists, and it was like, what are like considered the best horror TV shows? A lot of it is kind of what you'd expect. X-Files, which definitely has some horror episodes, like to
be fair to X-Files, does notably have some horror episodes in this vein.
Like one of the most terrifying episodes of anything of all time was it like Slink or Slither, or what was that episode called?
I don't know offhand. Yeah, but it's like very kind of like it's like Appalachian American backwoods horror kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think nearly maybe the 3rd or 4th episode of the first season of X-Files.
The 3rd, or maybe this is the 2nd even.
Are we thinking about the same episode?
The one that's talking about Slither or whatever it's called.
Okay,
yeah. It's the one where the guy like squeezes through the pipes.
Yeah,
and it's horrifying.
And I think he's taking people's livers and stuff. And it's one of the, if we're thinking the same episode, which is early on, it's one of the few episodes that gets a sequel in the show.
Yeah.
Because they're so critically acclaimed. Anyway, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And like other things on the list were like Twin Peaks, which absolutely, like, Twin Peaks is terrifying at times. Buffy was on the list, which, you know, has horrific elements. Wouldn't necessarily consider it a horror TV show.
So I suppose for this discussion, for what we were looking for, like, Buffy absolutely has horror elements. So there's things like Supernatural and Vampire Diaries, which were also on this list. But we're not looking at the moment for shows where the protagonists are also empowered, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like adventure horror. It's like you are like a horror film. You are
scary.
trapped. Yeah, exactly. Scary. Scary is an easier way to say that.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the ones on the list was Channel Zero. It was very high on the list. I'd never heard of it before. It aired on the Sci-Fi Network, 2016 to 2018, and it's all based on creepypastas. So if you're not aware, if you don't know what creepypastas are, they're basically just like I want to say like collaborative online horror storytelling. The most famous creepypasta of all time, of course, being the Slender Man, which made its way into video games, movies, TV, and stuff like that. My favorite version of Slender Man is definitely Green Hornets. Remember, was that what it was called?
Marble Hornets. The YouTube.
It was a terrifying YouTube series back in like 2011 or 12 that me and Joe and some friends used to like absolutely piss ourselves watching, with fear, not laughter. But creepypastas, yeah. So basically, just like classic, scary, spook yourselves out kind of stories. Maybe
with a couple of blurry doctored images to go along with it. And I actually think it's a wonderful thing, which I think we'll look at more critically as the years go on, because it's very much, I think, creepypasta and that kind of online anonymous forum storytelling, etc., is like an evolution of scary stories around the campfire. Kind of like it's very much the latest natural progression of the oral tradition, even though it's written, you know, but it's essentially like transcribed oral tradition. And I was charmed and very happy that we found the show for a very specific reason, which is the first season, which we're watching now. So they're all based on, I think each of the 4 seasons are based on established either short stories or creepypastas or things that are in the zeitgeist. And generally creepypastas, as Brian said, generally creepypastas, as you said, are collaborative and anonymous to a certain degree. Candle Cove, though, is different in the sense that it has a known author, and it wasn't created, I suppose, cynically. It was an attempt at storytelling, but by Chris Straub, who is a writer who wrote, amongst other things, a webcomic that I followed at the time in the early 2000s called Star Slip Crisis, which isn't relevant right now, but it's kind of one of these things I actually found from first principles. I kind of actually found it online and followed it and loved it in those early days where people weren't recommending things. It was absolutely wonderful. And he went on to write an ongoing horror webcomic called Brood Hollow, which is much in the same vein as Candle Cove. So yeah, it was like, oh, this kind of thing is coming back around. And I've never heard of this show before, and it's genuinely scary. Like, it's
scary and creepy and gross, and
it's very like much in the vein. And essentially the premise of the first season, which we're watching now, is that it's almost like Stephen King-esque in a certain degree. You know, man returns to his hometown after there was some brutal child murders in the 80s. His brother was one of them, and they all remember a very disturbing children's show called Candle Cove, which seems innocuous at first, about pirates, etc., but it's kind of, you know, the skin taker will come for your skin, you know, give your teeth to the toothed child, all that kind of early noughties horror kind of iconography. And that it seems to have influenced in some way, and now it's starting again. It draws on like a lot of really great stuff, and the what I find quite upsetting and scary about it is like it's quite unpredictable in its timing and its imagery. It's not following any conventions. I think
I would say it's probably there's a degree to which in this first season at least that like it's not following convention in a like it's haphazard, I would say, to some degree, but it's also like it's doing everything I want a horror TV show to do, which is that like, no, I don't need it to be like long lasting perfection, though there have been stuff like that, things like that. I want it to be like fun to watch now. and it's been really that. So we'll definitely keep everyone. We'll definitely update the podcast as we watch through.
Yeah, no, I think horror has to have this immediacy to it. That's the fun of it. So yeah, it's been a great find. So that's what we've been, and we've been screaming at our shadows in the mirror as well.
Yeah, and actually something that we should probably definitely mention is last Saturday we watched Fear Street Part 1. Which is I'm
rolling my eyes here because this is the obvious thing we should talk 100%. About. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, it's so at the moment it's the first episode, the first movie has released. It's going to be part of a 3-movie cycle, releasing
weekly.
Over next weekly. So Saturday is going to be the second episode, and the next Saturday after that is going to be the third, and it's based on an R.L. Stine book series. And we'll talk about it maybe more next week after the second episode has come out, or after the third. But go watch it. Go watch the first episode. If you like horror, if you enjoyed Freaky, maybe
I think
if you enjoy. Go on.
I think we can say without. I think it's one of the things we can say with a question that if you like Buffy, you're going to like this because
very likely
it's 90s, like the 90s. It's not cynical nostalgia, but the 90s themes and trappings and genre is 100% through it. It is classic 90s slasher with a modern eye. It's doing loads of interesting things. It is eminently watchable. Every horror podcast or film podcast I follow, like the day after, dropped an emergency episode about it, and also the protagonists are queer, and that is in itself notable and unheard of. So I will gush about it next week probably, but go and watch it now. It's an event. It's kind of it's a TV event, so watch along with us. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you find this episode of Buffy, Joel?
Do you want to
transition?
So speaking of a teen horror setting with lesbians in the 90s and early 2000s.
Speaking of it,
how did I find this episode? Entropy.
Well, I put the DVD in and I pressed down and right.
So it was a fine episode. It wasn't. It certainly wasn't the. It wasn't as complex as our entry last week with Normal Again. It had some positives, not some positives. I had specific positives. I had where it was Anya centric, which I like. Yes.
Emma Caulfield was great in it.
It was kind of an atypical episode in the sense that I was trying to rack my brain with you in the kind of the extensive pre-recording preparation we do. And there's no monster in this episode. Like Anya's kind of the threat, or the problematizer. I
would say Xander is,
but there's no even kind of hang wave. And here's the monster of the week, which is I am so struck watching season 6 how interpersonal drama it actually is foregrounded. It's something I always knew was there, but it's actually just what they give screen time to. No
100%.
And we essentially have Anya, which is like we understand we're to understand that she's now kind of vengeance demon. We see we're a vengeance demon face and all that kind of stuff.
The whole episode, Joel, is about her being a vengeance demon again.
Yeah, I know.
How did you miss this?
I'm like, is she? I'm also unclear. Like, is she humans? How much is their humanity in her, etc.
She's not a vampire. She doesn't lose her soul when she's a demon. She's just shown to be like capable and given extra powers by de Hoffrin.
Yeah, I suppose it's maybe similar to the way that Cordelia is part demon now as well. It's like a hybrid kind of thing. But actually, weirdly, interestingly, when we see her in the early episodes encountering Xander and wanting to curse him or whatever, we see her morph her face into demon mode in a vampire way, which actually doesn't happen otherwise with vengeance demons. Usually they turn around and it's like, oh, shock horror, she has no skin, which actually goes through the kind of the transformation.
And it was crap.
Yeah, it wasn't as practiced maybe as they're vamping out. So it's really very much centered on her dealing with Xander's actions and behavior, and by the end of the episode I thought it was notable that between everyone finding out about her having sex with Spike and Spike having had sex with Buffy, with Xander and Anya falling apart, the open conversation with Dawn's kleptomania, Tara and Willow kind of getting back together or kind of on the cusp of getting back together actually by the end of the episode. There's very few secrets in play, and usually in the show there's always something that's been kept from someone, so we really kind of have a bearing and exposure by the end of the episode. So what do you think of it?
Yeah, I actually quite liked it. I thought the I thought brought things along nicely. I think it's actually quite a tick up in quality from a lot of the rest of season 6. And yeah, with the Anya focusedness of it, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought that Emma Caulfield's really good. I thought there were some genuinely funny comedic moments. I thought the interactions between Anya and Spike are high quality. They have clear chemistry. And it gave me like my favorite pastime, which is Xander hating, because Xander is such a bastard in this episode.
He really, like, I know it's an easy target, but he really has created this situation, and I have to try to be sympathetic and try to understand why he decides to do it. Like, I know that obvious trauma and backstory he has, but he handles it poorly. And what makes him irredeemable in this action for me is that when he feels that he has been wronged at the end of the episode, he is immediately like, I don't even want to touch you or look at you. You disgust me because it's misogynistic straight up and straight down. Yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah, and so basically what happens is that Anya and Spike do have like, I think, a drinking session. They're quite nice to each other. They're both telling each other their sadnesses based on Buffy and Xander, and it's not really cynical. Anya goes there to get him. Well, no, she doesn't. She doesn't plan to get him to wish. No, she does want him to wish.
She does, but like, I always wonder with that, like, how much will Anya actually go through with like murdering Xander?
Well, she doesn't at the end. It's very, like, I think one of the very good character moments in this episode is towards the end when Anya, when Spike, after all being confronted by Xander, Spike goes to say, "I wish," about Xander to basically stop him, or to doing what Anya has been trying to do for the whole episode. She very quickly stops him, and it's a quiet and sad little moment of, no, I don't want to hurt this person, which is, interesting given that, like, Xander is such a bastard. Anyway, so I think when Spike and Anya like are talking to each other, it is a genuine moment of connection. It's
as you said, great chemistry between the two of them in that scene.
And the thing is, like, they're not having revenge sex in any way. They are not aware that anyone's watching them. They have no intention to tell anyone. They're doing it to comfort each other, and it's an adult moment that other people overreact to.
And I also think in both sides of it, it's maybe not the most advisable decision, but it is spur of the moment, I think, for both of them. Like, there's no calculation about it, or no, like, Spike isn't even trying to do anything other than just, like, he has base instincts. Xander's behavior is just it's impossible to excuse. So at the beginning of the episode, Xander or Anya is in Xander's apartment, and he's asking her, like, oh my god, I'm so happy you're here, and, like, I want to get back together, but no, I do not want to get married, and I think that I should have done all that sooner. Yeah, it was so. And it's a real, like, listen, if that's what you're trying to say, you need to find a better way to say it. Like, it's all so Xander centric the way he frames it, and it's so, like, frustrating because I kind of watched the episode. I was like, okay, from the start she's trying to hex him or whatever, and she's gone back or whatever, wherever we want to play it. She's genuinely open to talking about it. She just wants, like, the basic bare minimum of, you do want to still be with me and you do still want to marry me, etc. Given that, and I know, like, he's kind of saying, we could just wait and maybe in the future, etc. But, like, they've spent a lot of time working up to this. It's a very difficult thing emotionally to step down from that. She's very open to working with him, and he's just, like, not. And he doesn't. He's kind of more interested in making himself understood than he is in Anya's emotions or experience or anything like that. And then when he finds out about Anya and Spike, it is deeply misogynistic, his response of, you are tainted now. It's also an incredible display of ownership of a person in a really disgusting way. Like, he's like, you can't, I'm going to kill Spike because he touched the person who I recently left at the altar. Yeah, it's very questionable whether you would say that Xander and Anya, I think, are still together at this point. Like, they're definitely not, right? They're 100% not. She has not cheated on him. He left her at the altar and then, like, disappeared. If you leave someone at the altar, do you think that's an automatic dissolution? I'm not I don't have any controversial opinions at this. And then you disappear out of town for, like, a week. I think that's fair to presume the relationship is on hiatus at the very least.
No, I think that's an automatic dissolution, and you know, if the other person, if yeah, I don't think Anya is in any way cheating on him at this point. And also, like, he communicates it he obviously understands it the same way, because he keeps saying, you know, I want you back.
Yeah,
like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
So no, they're very clearly broken up.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So the ownership that he displays of, like, you know, oh, I think I should still get to determine who she sleeps with, is gross and shitty. And yeah, one of my most unfavorite Xander moments is this episode, for sure.
Yeah, it's a real, like, he is quite, like, pathetic in some, he's quite small in his behavior throughout, you know.
Yeah.
And it's so unnecessary. It's very frustrating. But I think it's also believable and realistic in the sense of, like, it's consistent with, you know, that is his arc, you know?
Yeah, this is Xander.
Yeah. But yeah, it generates quite a lot of pathos, I think, for Anya, and quite a lot of tragedy, because for whatever reason she really wants to still kind of pursue this and make this work. And the
realistically, like the extent to which Anya goes to try to hex Xander is, like, due to her, like, genuine emotions about him. Like, you know, she, like, when she's talking to Spike, she's like, oh yeah, no, I just wanted to sleep with him anyway, whatever, and then kind of quickly says, like, yeah, but, like, you know, he did make me feel good and nice, and I really liked him, and I just like everything about him, and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, like, Xander is a cunt.
Yeah, you don't try to hex someone who
you don't care about.
No feelings for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You only hex the ones you love.
Exactly. That's what they say. You always hex the ones you love the most. Is that?
Yeah.
And then otherwise, I think in terms of
I think it's very important to note that, like, extreme extended comedic sequence of Anya trying to persuade
everyone,
all the Buffy girls all the girls in the Scooby Gang to hex or to wish ill upon Xander is genuinely funny. Most importantly, when Willow and Tara are in the coffee shop, and Anya's like, well, you know, you're lesbians, so you hate men, so do you wish to wish evil upon Xander?
What use are you if you don't hate men? And then, like, an extended conversation about trying to rile them up about how Xander watches lesbian porn, and that's enough of a reason to, like, curse him.
Yeah, and like maybe some, like, choice phrases. You're lesbian, so the hating of men will come in handy. And, like, talking about how, you know, there's a girl, they'll enjoy the girl on girl action. And this is right after Willow has. I always find it so funny because, like, there's so many, like, you know, aggressive think pieces written about Willow's sexuality, about how, like, you know, it's bi erasure and stuff like this. It's just not. You know, Willow in this episode, it, like, specifically says, if I wasn't gay before, when talking about the penis monster in W Palace, and it's like, I think that's a pretty. I don't think you can put any more clearly that you consider yourself to be a lesbian.
So I think we've come to this Willow thing before. There's two conflicting things happening here. One is, yes, I will agree that, you know, when people talk about Willow's sexuality, they often think of the early episodes, but throughout the show, as we have here, it's made very clear that she considers herself gay. She actually says gay far more often than anything else.
She does.
I think it's interesting. Where that conflicts with the bisexual stuff is that it probably would have been an opportunity for bi representation, an opportunity to explore that, which
I totally disagree. I don't think it is an opportunity for bi representation when a character is gay.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that because I'm not saying that every gay character is an opportunity for bi representation. I'm saying you have a character here who explicitly has had relationships with men and women that were loving, genuine relationships, and at a time where there's a dearth of bi characters on television. And if you are bi, you're like, oh, I wish that represented me. And that's not necessarily the objective thing that should happen, but it's an individual want. But I think that gets conflated with the idea of, like, oh, I'm bi and I want this to represent me, and it does because she says this and this. You know, the text doesn't support the idea that she's bi.
Yeah. I don't think the text does support it. I think that people reading it that way tend to really grasp onto the relationship with Oz as proof of bisexuality, and it's like, okay, I hear you, but also, like, we all, I mean, like, all, like, homosexual kind of backstories, like, not all, such a significant amount of homosexual backstories around just narratives and stuff is about experiencing or trying on the kind of the heterosexual cap, and kind of, like, just like that's not an insignificant aspect of people's experiences.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean there, and like definitely very often people who at certain points in their life identify and feel that they are
straight,
gay.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Have heterosexual relationships early on. I think the nub and the kind of thing that we don't want to lose here with Oz is you don't want to minimize her relationship with Oz in any way, or diminish it in the sense that it wasn't a heterosexual relationship she had before she realized, or like, you know, that in any way wasn't the fullness of her feeling. I think really what we need to move towards, and what the clunkiness of this conversation really supports, is that the self-determination of people's own sexuality and gender, the individuality of people's experience, and just like, hey, if someone says that, you know, if Willow feels that she is gay and she always has been gay, but she had one genuine romantic or sexual relationship with a cis man, then that's just what her story is. Do you know what I mean? It's not a linear progression, or there's no objective way really to categorize if someone is gay or not. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of how they experience their journey.
Yeah, well, I would say that, like, you know, probably how Willow would look back on that is probably, you know, that was a very deep, important relationship to her, but like looking back, probably not necessarily a sexual one, or not a sexual one, but like not the kind of sexual relationship that like is fulfilling to her sexuality and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, but I suppose at the same time, if she was to say, oh, it was with Oz and it wouldn't ever be with another man, that's also just like a data point of her experience. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Like, I mean, there's like, I mean, the like famously bothersome to a lot of very online people, webcomic artist Erica Moen, who she did what was it called? I can't remember what her college webcomic was, but she now does Oh Joy Sex Toy, which is like reviews of sex toys and also other like sex education kind of stuff. Yeah, and she's annoying in lots of ways. But she considered herself to be a lesbian, very much so, and then met her husband, and she's like, well, you know, that's like not like, she doesn't consider herself a lesbian to be a mistake. It was just a straight data point that like she's like, oh, this really works for me, or whatever, you know? Yeah,
and I suppose Willow is like the ultimate example of really she should just be a character rather than meant to be a cipher for a gay experience, or like, and like for obvious reasons, for so many powerful reasons, she is that for a lot of people, and it's because of a lack of representation. But I feel that Willow does get this like pressure to like explain, or to be used as a
cipher for all things,
a cipher or a reference point, or a kind of a calibration for like what is gay and what is bisexual. And really at the end of the day, it should just be, this is just her collection of experiences.
And a collection of her experiences plus self-identification.
And if you recognize, if you take something from that, and if it's meaningful for you as a gay woman, or as a lesbian, or as a bisexual person, or whatever, then that's great. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not. I think we need to really denature the competitiveness of this, in the sense of like that there's limited resources, and if you see something in it, I can't. Do you know?
This is the thing I would say is like, so many people say like that gay white men are overrepresented in media, and I understand that to some degree. At the same time, no, they're really not. Straight people are overrepresented in media. We don't need to be saying, oh, look, those gay white men in media, and say, let's give some of those roles to bisexual people, or bisexual characters, trans characters, to people of color characters. Give the straight people's and straight white people's roles to like increase diversity.
We've had this conversation it's a really like rich conversation.
Get rid of all of them, I'd say.
Yeah, we've had this conversation a lot off mic in loads of different settings, and that is really, I think, the thing at the end of the day, is that
we feel like we're going to only get like that 10% ever of representation at
and
most.
Then we have to divide it amongst ourselves, and then
it's like, no, let's take it all.
But even the conversation of like, okay, we have this 10%, and in that 10% are white cis gay men more represented or less represented. You can have that conversation, but it's a false premise.
Yeah,
like we shouldn't be having the conversation amongst ourselves. We should be saying there should be, let's say if there's 100 roles on TV for cis white gay men, then there should be 1,000, and there should be 1,000 for everyone else who wants to be represented as well. And there's enough there.
1,000 gay white men and 1,000 everyone else.
But no, I don't want to like go through a list like per each, but do you know what I mean?
No,
like,
I get you. Yeah.
You like the people who are saying, oh, there should be, if you're saying there should be less cis gay men on TV, and there should be more like trans people of color, like those people should be able to get to a point where it's like they're saying there should be more cis gay men and more trans, and we're all saying that, like, they're not wrong. I absolutely understand.
No, of course.
How you get there.
I agree with the, like, you know, we need more representation of a more diversified gender and race and sexuality backgrounds. But what the field to eat into is always going to be the straights, you know, and the like the people who have absolutely dominated representation for so long. But I think there's also like a thing to note there, which is that, like, while there are some significant gay white men in media, there's also like a dearth of like wide representation, if you get me. Like, I mean, Looking is incredible as a TV show in the sense that it's just looking at it is just inspecting these characters and then moving on. But like, straight people have 100 of those shows every year. You know, Looking for straight people happens every day.
Yeah,
and we shouldn't be looking to that and saying, oh, this is, you know, this will suffice. It's like, no, let's do 5 more of those today. Let's do for gay men, and let's do tons more for lesbians. And like
the end goal is that, like, as a queer person, you can see yourself actually represented in the dozen police procedurals coming out of this fall, rather than there being, oh, this was a great year for queer representation. There was 10 programs for it. Yeah. Like, there are probably 20 programs on TV this year that are just about the New York Police Department. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then there's, like, you know, we always pick out the 5 incredible shows with queer representation. You're like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like, 5? That's not enough. Make it 50, please, tomorrow.
Yeah. Anyway. It's one reason why it's so wonderful to see.
Make it some really bad queer shit. You know, I want really bad TV shows that have loads of gay characters and
still get 7 seasons, even though they're like trash. Do you know what I mean? And
absolutely.
And, you know, I suppose, like, that's why stuff like Fear Street, which we'll come to next week, is great, because, like, the 2 main characters are queer. One is a queer person of color. Most likely, I don't think they don't really talk about it a lot, but I don't.
And discussion of class in it as well, actually.
But like, that doesn't take up a lot of time in the film. Do you know what I mean? In a good way, it's just like, that's from a future where films could just be neither. It's not the gay slasher film. Anyway, I suppose TLDR, Willow is gay. Yeah. And that's what we've kind of put to bed for all time. Yeah,
and following on from that, there's a very odd voiceover moment for Tara towards the end of the episode, in a really lovely scene where Tara basically says, hey, you know, we're going to have to build up trust again. We're going to have to really take a long time we should take a really long time to work back into each other's lives, see how we fit each other's lives, even if it will work. And she's like, we should do all that, but I'd rather just skip it and just kiss me. Just be in love again. And it's lovely. It's so comforting. It's also deeply cruel, knowing the episode that comes next. Yeah. But at the beginning of it, she says, "Things fall apart. Things so fall apart." I think is the line. It was a really awkward second line to it. But that's two interesting points there. A few interesting points there. One is things falling apart, obviously being entropy, definitional. So the suggestion in this episode that, like, things are splitting and crumbling in a way that's never really going to be fixed for the show. I think this episode really sets up Seeing Red very nicely, which is obviously coming next. But obviously it's a William Butler Yeats reference to the poem The Second Coming, which is I would say probably the best Irish poem, and it's maybe the best poem ever written. It's stunning. Go read it. It's short. It's like complex. It's very beautiful and very scary. It's the Things Fall Apart, obviously also being the Chuna Achebe novel that takes the namesake from this, but finishes with what rough beat slouches towards Bethlehem, ready to be born. paraphrased. I
I
think
think that's it. I think you got it.
thanks. I think there's an episode of Angel called Rough Beast, or
There's
Slouching Towards Bethlehem.
Yeah, if it's not of Angel, if it's not Angel, then it might be Babylon 5. But Slouching Towards Bethlehem is absolutely a title of one of these shows.
Yeah, and basically just the kind of the idea of like an oncoming, like, you know, obviously Yates, when he refers to a beast, it's a metaphorical beast, but I think a lot of genre TV has grasped onto it as like an oncoming awfulness, and he meant it metaphorically, generationally, and the second coming of Christ being like this metaphor for change and fin de siècle, kind of like nightmares and all this stuff. But
did you say fin de siècle because it came up on Jeopardy the other day?
Yes. It's also not, it isn't very fin de siècle. It's 1905, I think, was it that poem was written. Anyway, New Century, Nightmares. Anyway, so it's just interesting, and it is the kind of like what Rough Beast Slouches Towards Bethlehem is. It's a willow, realistically.
The Willow Beast.
Yeah, and that's who she's talking to in that moment. And it's her death, and it's the change, and it's like Buffy obviously being a second coming herself, and very risen and Jesus-y in a lot of things, and Buffy coming back wrong, and it's all like really tied together very like oddly and loosely and kind of quite well in that moment, I think, or in that little metaphor and reference. I just found it quite interesting.
You know what you've reminded me of there, where you're talking about Buffy kind of being Jesus-y and kind of coming back as the I don't know if I ever mentioned this before on the podcast, and I hope it's not offensive to our listeners of faith, but I did have a period where I was drawing a comic when I was a kid.
I believe it.
And it was, and I thought it was genius.
I've seen your drawings; they were truly awful.
It was more about the story behind it, and it was a comic called Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter.
Okay.
And it was basically like, so the council that condemns him, the Sanhedrin, or betrays him, like, were essentially all vampire elders.
Okay.
And there was a whole thing where he kind of comes back, and he, like, you know, because it's crosses, and he, like, you know, has all that kind of stuff. He has all this, and he's like a muscular Jesus as well. I'm really a lot here. And the tagline was, "The power of Christ impales you." Yeah.
Wow.
So I present that without opinion. That was just a thing that happened when I was a child.
And you wrote this before reading Let's All Go to Golgotha.
Yeah, I think so, actually. Yeah.
Oh, it's very Let's All Go to Golgotha. Is that what it's called? Let's All Go to Golgotha?
I think it might be just Let's Go to Golgotha.
Okay.
But I referenced it 100 times, but it's a classic 50s, I think it's 50s science fiction story about time travelers going to the crucifixion, and it turns out they're all time travelers at the end. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But there's like a moral implication to it, like we're condemning Christ for all time because we're perpetuating narratives, etc. It's a whole thing. It's a great story.
Yeah, as like, you know, your passive approval in situations. Anyway, okay, should we move into the dusting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Natural segue there.
So apparently, some Buffy Bits for you. Apparently, Amber Benson accidentally slipped some tongue in that closing shot. I don't know where this information is coming from, but I noted it. I just have some very good just lines noted here. For example, wish his penis would explode, for one thing. Anya at one point is trying to persuade Dawn to wish this upon Xander, and just goes squish, squish, squish. Yeah, and if you love men so much, go love men, which I thought was a beautiful line.
That really sums up our earlier debate quite eloquently, I think.
And one of my notes is just, yeah, as has already been mentioned, Xander is being a huge cunt, so appropriate. Do you have any Buffy Bits first, Joe?
Yeah, there's a weird moment in the opening of the episode where Spike, well, for one thing, Spike is kind of helping Buffy kill the vamps in the not playground, graveyard, and he's holding it up by the collar, but like CGI, because obviously you can't hold a man up. And he shouts something romantic at Buffy, and the guy turns around like he's talking to him. So like the joke is like, okay, yeah,
well, why won't you sleep with me again, is what he says.
Xander's apartment, I was like, he was sitting on the floor of his apartment drinking. I was like, it looks like he's in a bar. There's something about the apartment that is not inviting as a residential space. It looks like it's like he's in a closed like bar or something. Oh, and we also saw that there's a couple of exterior shots, which are clearly shot actually on location, and there's 2 extras walking behind.
On location in Sunnydale?
No, like in wherever it was.
I think it's Santa Monica.
Santa Monica. But there's 2 extras walking behind Dawn and Buffy, and because Dawn and Buffy are walking so slow, the extras are also walking like bizarrely slowly, and they look like they've been mind controlled. You know, it looks like that everyone there is kind of under some kind of spell. It's really strange. Oh, and I also have to give a special shout out to Willow's hyper realistic hacker dialogue, where she says that she has to get linked into the fiber optic network and find the feedback loop of their signal. Yeah,
bizarre.
And when we actually see the various hacking she's doing on both sides, the Troika's side and hers, it's very clearly like an iMovie file playing on the screen. Always wonderful.
Yep. So some fashion notes for you there, Joe. I quite liked what Xander was wearing at the beginning of the episode, actually, when he was in his apartment and he was just wearing like a nice linen white shirt and a tank top. I thought it just looked good. Tara's leather jacket is in the college is quite nice, and I actually think she's wearing it throughout the episode. Apparently it is the jacket that Dawn stole and gave Buffy for her birthday. That I don't know how, obviously just the props department sent it Tara's way for some reason.
And someone in the Scooby Gang knows how to get those tags off, obviously.
Willow was wearing a Chippewa Bay, New York crop top, but it's like merged with a sweater, so it's like all one piece. It was very confusing. I found Dawn's jeans when she was walking around Santa Monica very odd. They had like a built-in chunky belt. It was very, very confusing. Andrew's wearing a sweater at one point that is like blue and white, yellow. It's like kind of I can't remember what it was. It was like,
it's like embroidered or something.
It had weird flowers throughout, and it was very like surf bro attire from like the early 90s, and like very like annoying straight dude. I thought Xander's haircut looked pretty okay when it was down, when it wasn't like spiked up, which was good. But Xander overall just looks awful at the moment. He's not looking good.
He looks ill.
He does. And towards the end of the episode, Xander is wearing an incredibly heavy like pea coat. Or I shouldn't bring it. It's pretty just an overcoat, but it's very clearly like very warm California weather, and it was very confusing as to why he would be wearing such a heavy coat.
He's just having a full on breakdown.
And I also just thought Anya looked great throughout. She's kind of like, she looks a bit older, a bit wiser, a bit sadder.
Yeah, I relate.
I found the like college scenes very disturbing because like, oh yeah, these are supposed to be like young people still.
Yeah, like again, like how old are they? Like 21, 20?
22 or something. Yeah,
they really have a lot going on.
Yeah, they do. Joel, do you have any fashion notes?
No, yeah, you cover off everything. The Andrew kind of embroidered yellow top was the main thing that I was like, what's going on here?
Okay, do you have a death count for us?
Yeah, very minimalistic. 2 vamps perfunctorily staked by Buffy in the opening graveyard scene. Great.
Okay, and do you have a rating for me?
Rating, I would probably give this episode maybe 7.9 3/4 full balls of not Jack Daniels.
Yes. Okay, great.
It was okay. It was fine. Like, I didn't think it was a bad episode, but there wasn't, and there was like a lot of great Anya content in there, and actually the Tara and Willow stuff is really sweet. Even which you have to divorce from the tragedy coming to some degree, like we still get to see the sweetness in it. That's all great. It's just I just brought it down a bit because like, I also felt like there was no monster in it for one thing, which is like probably a really like banal thing for me to criticizing for, but it also just didn't do much other than just the interpersonal stuff, which is fine. I like these characters, but also I do like the monsters.
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna give it a 7.5. 7.5 bandages, like covered in bandages, like a quilt out of 10.
We didn't even talk about Halfrick, but anyway.
Yeah, Halfrick. That Halfrick scene was also very funny. I enjoyed the humor of it. I don't think it was like a super notable episode, but I think it actually did quite a good job of what it did. Maybe it deserves to be higher. And I like grand, all setting up the kind of end of the season, which starts next week.
Yeah, exciting
And kind of I'm scared. Like seeing Red is like, it is the most vicious and controversial episode of this show.
Yeah.
So I've already started doing my reading for it.
We'll have to make sure that we have an opinion and a rating that everyone agrees with.
Of course.
Because
actually I'm going into it. I'm not sure if I think it's good. I don't know if I remember seeing Red as being good, or if I just remember it as being kind of shocking and unnecessary.
I don't really remember seeing Reg as an episode of television. I remember it as something that happened to me. To me, it's like it's something in my I remember this happening, but I don't remember it so I don't remember it like creatively. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, should we move into the Cordelia chase?
Yeah, absolutely. Not a good episode.
No,
of Angel this week, called Double or Nothing. It's a gun-centric episode,
just because they aren't sure what to do with themselves after the wildness of the last episodes.
And always our problem with the gun episodes is nothing on J. August Richards or necessarily on the character. It's just I think we agreed we don't necessarily think they know how to write the character or what he's doing at any given moment.
Nope.
So really the long and the short of it is we see a flashback to when Gunn was in his gang days. He makes a deal with a demon casino boss to sell his soul, and now that he's falling in love with Fred, the demon boss is like, hey, don't give your soul to her, I'm gonna take it. And
most notable here, I think, is the like Fred and Gunn chemistry being completely non-existent.
Yeah, it's just not there. And then we eventually, so they all kind of rally together. He tries to deal with himself for a bit. They all kind of rally together to help him in the end. And then we find out he sold his soul for the truck that he has. But there's just, again, a lot of broad characterization for him. When we see him kind of going to the club in the past, it's like all kind of like broad kind of like tough guy gang stereotypes. They're playing Gangster's Paradise as he walks into the club, which is just weird because they very rarely use licensed music or like notable music, and this is where they decide to deploy that.
Like, I mean, it's the most stereotypical song of all time. It's a great song in lots of ways, but also it's
pointed, I think.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, it feels like someone was trying to be like, smart with it. Yeah. And it just fails wildly because it just doesn't feel like, if you were like doing that and then like showing a black character who was fully fleshed out, fully realized, and very comfortably portrayed, like written by black people, or like felt like the people who were writing it had like known a black person at any point in their lives, which maybe is mean. There might have been a black person on this writing team, and I might be being horrible to them right now, but
not that we're aware of and not that we've read of, and I don't think it comes through in the writing if that's the case. Yeah.
But I feel so bad because this is all we talk about Gunn ever is just it's just this, and it's just, I don't know, maybe we're obsessing over it. Maybe we're like seeing this, and like maybe there are people out there who watched this and just felt like included in the Buffyverse because there's a black man portrayed there.
I'm sure that there's an absolute element of inclusion for people, and we're obviously not particularly qualified to talk about this in many senses, but the reason why we focus on it, I feel, is because it is obviously not an issue with the character per se, and not an issue with the actor, and we want it to be strong for that inclusive reason. And if it's so awkward at times that it's very notable to us, that's a problem. And also, like, the Buffy and Angelverse has a massive problem with race. Like, it's an intensely, ubiquitously almost white program.
Well, look at the cast at the moment of Angel, not the cast, the characters of Angel. Wesley, hugely fleshed out, has gotten an incredible arc. Angel himself, like, such a wide variety of experiences between, like, happiness and, like, extreme darkness and joy, all these things. Fred, who's introduced so recently, has actually developed quite a lot of character, and is quite, like, tough and standalone. And then Cordelia, like, the ultimate, like, progression from one character mode to another. And even Lauren, like, who's warm and comedic and kind of like has a very interesting pacifist nature. And you get to Gunn, and it's like Gunn, his character is black.
It's always portrayed in opposition. It's always portrayed in, like, any of the other characters across the shows kind of aren't defined by their utility or where they come from, if you know what I mean. Like, whereas he is like, he's an underfleshed out character class from, like, a role-playing game or something. Like, he is the street tough, and he brings X truck and Y connections and Y Z past. So yeah, that's where the problem comes from for me. And I also, because I never noticed this so much when I was younger, and now I'm kind of like, I really feel like that this doesn't age well, I suppose, this portrayal. But
again, that's not saying that is two white men who, like, I don't know, maybe this was like seen as like, I don't know. It definitely isn't good enough representation for today anyway.
No, I think it's exactly similar to the conversation earlier on, which is it's absolutely great that he's there, and I really hope some people felt represented by that and included in a way that they haven't before. And because he is the only black person on the cast, he has the burden, intentional or otherwise, of having to do all the representation and having to be all these ciphers.
It's just funny because, like, while Willow, like, definitely has that same burden, Willow is able to have her own character while being gay, whereas like Gunn is never given any opportunity to be anything but a black stereotype. As in, like, obviously black people, their blackness is inherent in everything they do, obviously. Well, I'm not sure if people would say that actually. Anyway, their race isn't necessarily definitional to all their interactions, but I would say that, like, it's, I suppose the issue with Gunn is that they when they wrote his character sheet under his traits, they wrote black and nothing else. Yeah,
but that's his introductory episode, and why he's there is because he is from that community, because he is from the stereotypical kind of like vampire fighting gang on the streets, kind of working class, all that kind of stuff. Whereas Willow has this whole character before that. Yeah. Anyway,
and after.
That's not just this episode, it's a whole conversation to do with this show, and later in terms of how he progresses and tries to become a lawyer and what he does to do that, and kind of, there's a whole Gung side of this show. But it means at the moment that his episodes are just awkward.
They are
awkwardly written at times, and often quite like just tonally strange.
I found one thing I found really odd about this episode is Cordelia's reintroduction and finding out about Connor and everything that's gone down. It's kind of bad.
Yeah.
She's kind of like falls flat. She doesn't really feel like she's there. She's just there to be around. And I found that she was underwritten.
Yeah, it's another episode where Angel doesn't talk for most of it. It's just implied by him being places and stuff. A couple of weird notes about it, very briefly, is that the actor who plays the heavy, kind of who kidnaps Gunn, we're laughing because it's lashing rain outside the window, and a woman just walked by very somberly carrying a Hoover.
Yeah, a Dyson stick Hoover.
Yeah.
It's very odd.
Like an exposed Hoover. The actor playing the heavy is the same actor who plays Marcus Cole on Babylon 5, who's one of the primary characters, a show which I watched extensively, obviously, and this is pretty much the main thing he did, so he's under very heavy makeup here. So we have kind of a comedic moment in the casino at the end where Angel comes and helps, sets up a double or nothing, i.e. the title deal with the casino boss, essentially a flip a coin kind of thing. Sets it up like he knows exactly what he's doing, loses it, and then resolves it just by chopping the guy's head off. And then the guy's head grows back, newborn like, mewling out of his neck, and it is some of the most intense monster work I've seen across both of these shows. It is horrific. It's the thing, like, I think I would probably give this episode like 5 feminist gestures.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a 6 generous failed.
I think you're being generous there, but like I would go with 5. But like you said, not quite sure where it wants to go after the real highs of like the last arc, and Wesley is just being absolutely treated like shit by everyone. Do you know what I mean?
Fred goes to visit him and is like, I'm so sorry to hear that you're like, like nearly died, but also I think you did the wrong thing, and fuck you, basically.
Yeah, basically.
It's real harsh.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us on this adventure this week on Buffy Boys. Very happy to have you here, and we will see you right here next time for an equally lighthearted episode of Buffy as we watch Seeing Red. So if you haven't seen it recently, maybe rewatch it. I think it's kind of a tasty one to.
I think it's very appropriate to skip the Bronze Banter next week, not because of the tonal stuff, but I think there's going to be plenty to discuss.
Yeah, I think we might want to go back right straight into it. So looking forward to that. If you enjoyed that episode, please let us know. It's always valued, always appreciated.
If you didn't like the episode and think we talked too much about gay shit, please send an email to doublefuckyourmother@gmail.com.
So I have to register that address as well.
Yeah.
Okay. If you enjoyed the episode, please let us know. Tell your friends. Tell the Troika spying on you through webcams.
Please stop saying Troika.
And we will see you next time on Buffy Boys.
See ya.
See ya.